Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your Fulham podcast from Down Under. And we are back again. And what a time it is to be a Fulham fan off the back of two 5-0 wins, going into game against a strong Newcastle team who are in a terrible patch of form at the moment. It could be 3 in a row for Fulham. Here to talk it all over, we have Elton. How are we going, Dad?
Well, very good, son. Evening, both of you. And hello to everyone who's tuned in.
It's very
Lovely,
formal.
thank you very much.
I know.
I was hoping to
It
say
was a bit.
Jack, son. But yep, I'll take it. Sammy, how are we going tonight?
I'm going good. I don't have too much to report. I had a tickle in my throat, and now I have worked past it. So I'm ready for this.
I was about to move us forward very quickly once he said good and just go, right, that's enough. But well done on surviving your tickle, Sammy. Well, let's get straight into it, guys. And obviously, I wasn't with us earlier in the week to discuss the West Ham game, so we'll very briefly touch on it. And I mean briefly. Obviously, an amazing win, back-to-back 5-0 wins. First time Fulham have ever done that in the Premier League. I hit up our friend on Twitter, Random Fulham Stuff, to see if he could find a time when Fulham have ever done that in the top division, going back all the way to the start of when records were first kept, and he couldn't find an instance of it either. So it really is a very purple patch for this team at the moment. And Sam and Dad, I'll throw to you first, I guess. Do you feel like there's a bit of luck involved, or do you think everything's just clicking at the moment?
No, I don't think there's luck. I think we've been incredibly persistent. I'm struggling to get past your Stevie Wonder shades you've got on there, Sam. They're really putting me off. But anyway,
you were meant to completely ignore them, so it made it look even more ridiculous.
Mm-hmm,
okay.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay. Well, I failed. I think this is a case of persistence when we had little other choice, and it's kind of we've won through and prevailed. We've prevailed. Jimenez has prevailed. What I love about it is that Jimenez's turn in form has truly sparked a number of other people. I think Tosin's introduction is timely. He's been terrific. Obviously, Bassi moving onto the left has released him. Robinson's return of form. Robinson's return after the international break has been fantastic. And I think everyone's feeling a bit inspired. And as you said the other night, there's fun in the camp. And what could be better than that from a Fulham fan perspective? It's fun, it's enjoyable, it's very positive, it's happy. And if there were any sort of troubles and I don't know, kind of downbeat mood at the end of the last transfer window, I think that's past us or behind us.
We've gone over the bridge of troubled water, and we're.
I could have just said that.
You could have, but you know what? Leave the poetry to Sam. No, no. It's just, I mean, just revel in the happiness. I mean, it's just such a lovely, harmonious period right now. And yeah, it probably won't last, like all good things. But you know what? I'm just gonna bask in the sun. And Jack's on mute. Is Jack still on mute?
Dad, yeah, I really wasn't mute. No. What I was going to say is it's I wouldn't get too downbeat about it, saying it's not going to last, because the way we're playing at the moment, it really seems like, you know, even if we potentially come up against very high quality opponents, we have it in us to actually dominate them, or at least give them a really good game. You know, this is a West Ham side that is a current European champions. They're doing fairly well in the league. When we played them, they were 6 points ahead of us and had a really good start to the season as well. They're doing well in Europe. They don't have a huge number of injuries that are causing issues for them. And the team that we played against is basically the team that played in Europe last season and won a trophy. So it's not to say that we can't continue to challenge. And I think this weekend is going to be a really good example of that when we come up against a Newcastle side who, the last couple of years since their takeover have, absolutely skyrocketed, signed some really good players. We saw it when we played them at the Cottage last year, and we got completely turned over. Outdone by some really good goals, outdone by some really good play, but it does feel like a different beast at the moment. We're obviously podcasting the day after they've been knocked out of the Champions League and Europe in total as well, which is a big blow for Newcastle. Dad, you had a quick look at the game. Your thoughts on how Newcastle were playing, and if there's maybe something that we can exploit there.
Oh, look, to be fair, I watched 3 minutes of highlights, and we all know that that doesn't tell a story. And from what you were discussing offline before we kicked off, you were saying that apparently they were busy and exciting early on, and once AC equalised, I don't know if they dropped their bundle or AC just overran them. Look, the highlights from the highlights package, they actually had a couple of pretty tasty attempts on goal, and the AC's goalkeeper looked amazing and was denying them. And there was one opportunity that Alvarez had just to tap the ball in. It was a miraculous foot that just crept in front of him in slow motion. He was literally like a half a meter out from goal, and he just couldn't execute. And the guy just cleared it off the line wide of the post. So I guess I'm just thinking about this in terms of coming into that game. They've been battered about a bit in terms of form, suspensions, injuries, and a midweek game with 2 or 3 sleeps to catch up. It's a good time to get them. The only thing that could be better is actually playing them in London at the Cottage, because it's not an easy place to go.
No.
But I think this we couldn't be in a better position to give them a real cracking.
I still think they're a really awesome side. I mean, objectively, man for man, in a lot of categories, they're pretty excellent. I think they're just really suffering from just being really, really tired. They have far exerted themselves. And they're really, really ahead of schedule in terms of like what they should be achieving with regards to the amount of money that's actually been put into them. And I think they have kind of suffered from it's not even necessarily like a lack of depth, but they've just essentially played the same squad for the majority of this season. And this like 5-game stretch that they've played, they've pretty much played the exact same squad. And I do kind of think that AC Milan was pretty much the last straw, and that puts us in a real tasty position. Not gonna lie, I would really, really like to beat Newcastle. I've been waiting for this for quite a while now.
Yeah, look, like you both said, this Newcastle team is very stable, but at the same time, when you have the European adventure going on, it causes a bit of an issue when you don't actually have the squad depth, and when you have a lot of injuries in the squad as well. Looking forward to the game on the weekend. Kieran Trippier's out suspended as well. There'll be a few players coming back. We saw Dan Burn make an appearance, Harvey Barnes as well. Longstaff, I think, had been out injured. He made an appearance off the bench. So there are a few players coming back for Newcastle, but it just feels like they're thin on the ground, and the players who are in that starting lineup at the moment are just knackered. The stat, I think, was that in the Premier League they went unchanged for 5 games straight, which sort of seems like a good thing. But when you've got Champions League games in every midweek on top of that, and all of those players going off for international duty and playing as well, it's a very, very big task to maintain a fully fit squad and to get the best out of those players. Because as we've seen in the last few games where they got overrun by Spurs, they got overrun by Everton, they've been overrun by AC Milan. First half, they play well. I think if we can keep ourselves in the game in the first half, the second half is where we'll win the game. It's when the tired legs come. It's when players like Robinson, Willian, Harry Wilson, players with that little burst of speed and that ability to just have a quick break, those guys are going to come into the game and actually be game changers for us.
Isn't it amazing? I mean, we just chinwag about this stuff all the time, over and over. But however elite and incredible the top 4, 5, 6 clubs are in terms of their squad, it's just, it doesn't take that much to break your form and for it to kind of come all unstuck. Because in the end, to really be a very high achieving squad, it has to be clockwork, doesn't it? It really has to be clockwork. And
Yeah,
you lose a
absolutely.
couple of players, even though the player, you've got depth, the player coming in who replaces an injured or suspended player is a high quality player, but he's just not the same combination. And suddenly you look at it on paper and think, geez, that's a formidable team. They are unbreakable, but it just doesn't work like that. And it does come down to you know, it's almost imperceptible, the kind of stuff that makes a great team elite.
But
Oh,
it's
Jack,
there's
you go.
very. I was just going to say there's very current situations that are similar to that we see. You look at Man United without
Yeah,
Casemiro and Eriksen, for example.
yeah.
They are a atrocious team. They can't make anything work at the moment. Even Man City, without De Bruyne and Rodri playing, they struggle big time. They're not creating the chances, and you have this beast up front in Haaland who scores more than a goal a game on average. You take De Bruyne away and you take his service away, even though you've got these amazing players like Phil Foden out wide and some of this young talent that they've got coming through, they still can't manage to score goals. So it really is, it shows how much, even at the top level, one player can actually make a change.
Mm.
And with Newcastle, it's multiple players. And that's sort of where we're able to step in and make a difference. Kieran Trippier, for example, is a huge loss for them. He's not
Mm.
injured, but the fact that he's out, I saw a stat, I think I sent it through to you guys as well. I might not have. It was from the other 14. And Kieran Trippier has created the most chances from non-set pieces of any player in the Premier League this season.
Yeah, he's been excellent.
So he is the person who's setting up the goals, the chances for Isak and Callum Wilson up front. Having him out is making a huge difference to that lineup, and you're going to see probably a young player coming in to replace him. I think this is a real opportunity for us to cause a massive upset against this Newcastle side. Sammy, I don't know how much you've been following Newcastle through the season, but in terms of the players who are likely to take to the pitch on the weekend, where do you see Newcastle's strengths?
Well, I was literally just about to say that, Newcastle is one of those teams for me which I objectively have very little care about. So I'm not following that closely. I know that they're doing well. I know they're the context of who they are, how they're progressing and everything. Obviously, I really like Isak. Callum Wilson's incredibly strong, like Joe Linton, Nick Pope. They have, and yeah, obviously Trippier as well. They have these very, very key players, but I'm not watching them on a weekly basis. So if you ask me how Newcastle play, I would not really be able to tell you. I don't know if they have as much fun as we do. From everything I've seen in terms of highlights, they seem to be quite rigid. I don't know if that's a reflection of their personality. I think they have a tendency to be very, very clinical, but I think
I think
they
that's the right
can.
word.
Yeah, but I think they can also be pretty easily opened up because they is it fair to say that they've got quite a Germanic style of play? It's very regimented. It's very opportunistic, but I haven't seen too much flair from them. This could entirely be my perspective, but you know what? I would very much rather play a tired, regimented squad because then that's when flair can really, really thrive. And Fulham full of flair. That's a tongue twister and a half right now.
Ooh, I reckon Alvarez is pretty flary.
He is pretty flary, but
Almiron.
if you Almiron,
Mhm.
yeah, Alvarez
Oh,
is very flary.
Sorry.
No, but I think you are right. But one individual that's incredibly vibrant doesn't necessarily make up a squad personality. I think you can genuinely say, like, Fulham at the moment is full of je ne sais quoi and full of creativity, which is awesome to like see and speak very proudly about. But yeah, I just don't know enough about Newcastle. I know that's poor punditry, but that's just the honest truth. I go into this game a little bit blind, but I think
Thank God you know a lot about football.
I just talk shit. That's just what I do. That's why I'm invited on a weekly basis. But yeah, that's why you have me.
They have a good group of players, I think, but they're probably not performing to the same levels they were last year. And I'd say a lot of that is down to the fact that they've had this injury crisis. I mean, Callum Wilson's had a really good season so far. So has Isak. They've scored goals up front. That's not an issue for them at the moment. Wilson's got 7 from 11. Isak's got 7 from 12. Anthony Gordon as well up front has 6 from 15. He's probably playing more on the wing than as an out striker. But if you look at Almiron, who scored quite a few goals last year, he's only got the 2 goals and the 1 assist. He's only created 2 big chances for the whole season, and he pulled the strings when we played them last time.
I remember that.
So he's definitely was someone who was at the top of their game when we played them last time out, and is just not hitting that same level. But look, the injuries I think are probably the more important thing here. The fact that players like Jacob Murphy, who gave us quite a torrid time last time round, he's only played the 5 games this season through injury. Anthony Gordon apparently went off with a bit of a niggle during the AC Milan game. Not sure how serious that is. Callum Wilson's obviously just returning from injury as well. And look, it's a long season ahead. This is probably a game that I know Fulham are in form, but if you were the Newcastle manager and you looked at your upcoming fixtures for the rest of the season through to Christmas, which is also an incredibly congested period, you have to be looking at rotating some of these players and actually giving some of these guys a rest. Newcastle play us now. They play Luton on the 23rd, Nottingham Forest on the 26th, and then they've got a very, very tough run where they play Liverpool, Man City, and Aston Villa. So they do have to rotate some players and give people a rest before that very important little patch of fixtures for them.
I wonder, it's a shame that we couldn't get Jack from Toon Down Under podcast on because he had other prior commitments. But I'd love to know what the feeling in the stands and in the crowd and in the supporter base is, because they've had, it's kind of like, I don't know, marrying into a rich family or winning the lottery. They've kind of almost been embarrassed for riches, particularly where the money's come from. But they kind of worked through that, and they have got this completely optimistic view of the future. And why shouldn't they have? Because they haven't even gone out and spent absolute fortunes. They've done it in a very steady way, and the future looks incredibly bright. And now they're looking a bit ordinary, and their form says that their performances are pretty ordinary and average. And I wonder how what the feeling's like in the fan base.
It must be a bit weird, isn't it? Because it's so early on. I think Eddie Howe is a good starting point, but in the exact same way that City developed however many years ago before they found Pep, they did have to go through a couple of transitional managers before they found their man. I still think Newcastle are a while away from finding that key person. I have no idea who it is, but You got to be optimistic when the Saudis buy your team in this sort of way. When there's a really clear trajectory, like I truly believe that they'll win a Premier League probably in the next 3 years.
I really hate to say that, and this is possibly sacrilegious to mention on this podcast, but
You want it to happen?
Can you imagine how much Silva would love that job?
Oh no! Literally, the first thing that came into my head when I was saying it, I was like, Jesus! Like he could totally be there, man. That could totally be a thing. And the idea makes me sick to my stomach. I didn't want to entertain it. It literally came into my brain, and I was like, I'm just going to shelf that idea. We're going to shelf that idea for a completely new life. You know.
Jack's shaking his head. He's not convinced.
Look, I think they'd probably be looking at bigger managers than Silva. If you look at the pot of managers you can take from around the world, and it's not a slight against Marco Silva, but you have the ability to take the best managers from around the globe. There's 5 top leagues in Europe. There's good managers in all of those leagues. I'd say Silva is maybe the 40th best manager in the world. Maybe 50th.
You say that. I love because this is a very Jack response, because you love to say you say that, but you say that, but look at Ange Postecoglou. He would not be in the top 40 managers in the world. I know it might be easy to say that he would be now, but he certainly wasn't a year ago. And look at the kind of formula, not the formula, but look at what he's done. I think Marco Silva's a bit of a similar character.
I'm saying that's a very different situation when you are the Saudi group and able to pump in as much money and pay whatever. You can pick from the very best of the best.
Absolutely,
Tottenham have had to be smart about this and try to change the culture and try to do something. And Tottenham tried it. They went, let's bring in Jose Mourinho, potentially the best current manager in the world. It didn't work. So they've gone, right, we need to try something different.
Look at Pochettino, Chelsea.
It's a different situation. When you've got all the money in the world, like Man City do, you bring in the best manager in the world, Pep Guardiola.
I think though, it's probably going to take a couple of managers to get to the Thomas Tuchels, the Contes, the real like elite we win Champions League level managers, and I could see Silva being a stepping stone manager in that kind of way, which is so blasphemous to say, and but I could definitely see them going for that sort of a manager in the lead up, because I don't think they're going to get Thomas Tuchel like as the next manager. I feel like that's just like I feel like you couldn't sell.
They have
Thomas
the money.
Tuchel. I know they have the money, but you also need to have you. I feel like with those type of managers, you need to have a bit more assurances than just money. Does that make sense?
Anyway, just a little sidebar.
It's a good sidebar.
Interesting thought.
An interesting thing to say. You say Man City needed multiple managers before they won the league. When they got taken over, they had Sven-Göran Eriksson. Well, he just left, and then Mark Hughes took over. He was the manager when the takeover happened, and then they brought in Mancini the next season, and Mancini's the person who won the league for them. So actually, they only changed one manager.
Well, no, but like that was way before City established the dynasty that they actually did. Like winning the league and starting a decade run where you essentially destroy everyone else are two very different things, in my opinion, at least.
I mean, I think winning the league is the pinnacle. The dynasty is nice, but Newcastle's aim will be to win the league, and you build the dynasty off the back of that. You need the right manager in the first place to get there. Anyway, nice sidebar, but let's have a quick look at the table. Well, actually, no. Before we do that, I've got a couple of factoids from our friend at Fulham Random on Twitter, Random Fulham Stuff, who's dug deep into the Fulham yearbooks and his plethora of information about Fulham random facts. This is from at Fulham Random, looking at our head-to-head record in the 77 first-class games we've played against each other. We've both won the exact same amount, 31, which means just the 15 draws between the teams. The competition we hate playing Newcastle in is the FA Cup. Newcastle have won all 4 games with an aggregate score of 20-4. And all 4 of our goals came in one game, which we lost 5-4. couple of interesting facts there. And look, Newcastle aren't a team that I personally remember us beating very often. There was a great game at St James's Park years ago where Mark Crossley made a number of saves, and I think we ended up winning that 4-1. But without Crossley, we definitely would have lost that by a much larger margin.
I like miscellaneous facts section. Is this a new thing that we're doing? Can we keep this up? That was fun. I liked that.
Well, it was flowing nicely until you stepped in there. But yeah, we've been talking with Fulham random Fulham stuff on Twitter, and I hope we'll be able to continue to pull little factoids in. It's tough to pull them out on request. These are often things that are stumbled upon or found in the process of looking for something else. Interestingly, ChatGPT is not very good at finding these stats. I have tried. I know for a fact
Bing.
that
ChatGPT is basically Bing now.
I know for a fact that Random Fulham Stuff has a book, which I actually have 2 copies of for some reason, that he says the covers are absolutely falling off at the moment, and that's what he spends his time leafing through to find these stats.
Isn't there a new
I
Google thing that you can use?
These stats have not been digitized. It's a massive job for someone because there's like 400 pages worth of stats sitting in the back of this book, which is the complete Fulham history up until the year 2006.
Up until 2006. So it's
that's when the book was published.
It's 18 years out of date.
He keeps spreadsheets for the rest of the stats.
All right.
Now, Jack, you have a 3-year-old, and very soon he could be put to work for modest pocket money, scanning those pages.
Yeah.
Scanning those pages into ChatGPT for instant recall for the most amazing analysis and cross-referencing. What I was going to say was,
I love that we start a Patreon for child labor. Hell yeah.
What I think is interesting about Newcastle, they haven't always been a high-flying club. Massive following, huge religious following in the town, but always a fortress. And what's amazing about teams like this is that they can be having ordinary seasons, whatever league they're playing in, but really difficult to beat at home.
Yeah.
So it almost always comes down to how good they are on the road. And yeah, I mean, you go back to the Alan Shearer years. I mean, they were good through all of those years, really. But it's certainly this top 6 business for Newcastle is very, very recent stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, you look back in the late 90s or mid to late 90s, and this was a team that just missed out on winning the Premier League under Kevin Keegan. They were a very good side, but obviously had a massive fall from grace in the 2000s when they got relegated, or 2010s when they got relegated down to the Championship a couple of times, I think. And look, they've bounced back. We played them in the Championship, which is actually the last time we beat Newcastle. We haven't beaten them in the Premier League since 2012. That was the season. We beat them in 2012, and we also beat them in the January of 2012, 5-2 as well. But look, we haven't beaten them in our last 5 fixtures against them. We've had some pretty bad losses, like the one at Craven Cottage. It's definitely going to be a tough game for us, even though Newcastle aren't in the greatest of form at the moment. I don't think we can walk into this one expecting to walk away with an easy win by any means. It is a fortress, like you said, St James's Park. It's a tough place to go and pick up points for any team. From all accounts, it's one of the most intimidating places to go and actually play football. The fans feel on top of you. They're vocal throughout, and it's going to be a tough game for us. But look, the form we're currently in, we're definitely giving ourselves every possible chance to actually get a win out of this one. Let's have a quick look at the table here. Fulham now sitting in 10th place. The joyful part here is the fact that our goal difference has now slipped back to 0. We have 26 goals scored, 26 conceded. Obviously helps massively when you have a couple of weeks where you pick up plus 10 or plus 11 to your goal difference. And look, Dad, you mentioned it when we were talking earlier this week. The table's tight. If you look below us, there's 4 teams all on 19 points. So having that little bit of a boost with your goal difference is really vital at this stage of the season, and will be incredibly vital in 22 games' time when the season comes to a close. We can see there's now a. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, it was only a couple of games ago. I mean, literally a month ago, where I was really starting to think, how can we lose this pretty ugly goal difference? And who would have dreamed that in a couple of games you literally neutralized it? It's extraordinary, really. I mean, it's amazing.
A month ago, I thought we were in a relegation fight. I was fully mentally prepared.
We were trying to talk ourselves out of it, but we actually were.
Yeah.
Not far off it.
It was a bleak time.
To put it in context, if you have a look at the table that I've got up on the live stream at the moment, we have 21 points. So for the last 3 games, we've picked up plus 11 in goal difference, or plus 10 in goal difference, and we've picked up 9 points. So that takes us down to 12 points with a minus 11 goal difference, which puts us 17th. And basically in the same position that Nottingham Forest are in at the moment, who have minus 11 and 14 points.
And on par with Everton, who are going well and are likely
been docked 10 points.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, if you did a projection and looked at how Everton have been tracking, if we didn't turn a form around, that would have been a massive problem. Everton would have carried on.
Yeah, and look, I think we can still agree that there is a gap to those bottom teams, and now, excuse me, it's even more obvious because Everton have climbed out of the relegation zone. It kind of fluffed the numbers for a little bit, but we see none of those teams have reached double figures in terms of points yet. Luton on 9, Burnley on 8, Sheffield United on 8. And in terms of goal difference, Luton have the best goal difference at minus 15, Sheffield United at almost minus 30. You just can't really see a way back from there. And I'm just glad we've got that gap over those teams now. We're talking a 12-point gap, same amount of games played. Realistically, do we see Luton, Burnley, or Sheffield United, and this is posing a question, do we see any of those sides picking up that extra 4 games advantage that we have over them across the rest of the course of the season? Considering we have to play Burnley twice, Luton and Sheffield once in that period as well.
Didn't Luton very recently sack their manager? Have they sacked their manager yet, or was that am I thinking of Sheffield United?
Luton have had a couple of wins, haven't they? I mean,
yeah.
I guess what we're trying to really establish here is whether this is a flash in the pan or things have changed and things have actually clicked. Without trying to simply be optimistic, because I love Fulham, I actually think, we've talked about this a couple of times now and tried to analyze why it has happened. It's not simply because one player, Jimenez, is suddenly scoring goals. There are a lot of things that have changed. And so I am struggling to believe that this is a flash.
It's actually really difficult to say. I'm glad you actually raised this because we have been incredibly stoked over the past 2 weeks, and the pride levels are through the roof right now. And Newcastle is a real genuine test as to where we're actually at. I mean, even if we can push them to a draw, I'd still say that's a really, really, really good result, especially over there.
Newcastle
it's
away,
hard, isn't it? What?
I was going to say I slightly disagree that it's a benchmark of where we're at, because this Newcastle team, I don't think you can judge yourselves against them because they're not fully fit. If we get a win against them, I think it's almost kind of expected. I mean, I think I haven't looked at the odds for this game, but I wouldn't be overly surprised if both teams are paying sort of roughly the same. I think Fulham are in a great run of form at the moment, and Newcastle are in a bad run of form and have a lot of injuries. I'd say more realistically would be to put us up against against the Wolves, which was actually a very good test of where
Well, I
we're
think
at
West
because
Ham.
we're both.
I think West Ham
Oh,
was
West
good.
Ham as well, yeah.
Mm.
Wolves, West Ham, those teams that are roughly around us in a similar sort of vein of form as well. I think that's probably a good way to judge yourself. I don't know what Newcastle are going to get. I don't know if they're
Yeah.
going to bounce back really nicely from that that loss. You know how it goes. Sometimes you lose in Europe, you have to bounce back, and the best way to do that is in the league against the Fulham team who are on form, and you get this really good victory, and things fall back into place.
It's very
Or
difficult
this
to do that.
terrible run of form continues and you're even more tired in this upcoming game and it falls to pieces even further. Like, it's hard to really work out which way this one's going to go.
Mm.
I think if the root of your problems is simply form, then it's a possibility that good preparation and a great psychological headspace as a team can turn that round. But
Yeah.
if you're tired, if you've got injuries, and you've got players out, good players out through suspension, that's really difficult to turn that round. It's a monumental job to turn that round, to actually get a bunch of different players, one playing together regularly, and hand them the challenge of actually turning around the form is very, very tough.
Mm. Just a cheeky little best bet for the day. Fulham to win 5-0, paying 200 to 1. It's surely a guarantee.
Oh.
3-5-0 results.
Oh,
But genuinely, looking at the odds for this game, Fulham are actually paying $4 to Newcastle paying $1.80.
it's good.
It's
good odds. I think it's good odds.
And even a draw is paying $3.90. So
I love the way Jack's
it's actually
we got to bring back.
I love the way
Jack's top
Jack's
bets.
sneaking the segment back in.
I love Jack. I
gamble
love
responsibly.
I love Jack Top's bet. I don't know why we got rid of it. It used to crack me up every single
gamble
time.
responsibly. Gamble
It's
responsibly.
funny. It's so good.
No, but seriously, it I mean, it is a good bet. But seriously though, it's an important game. Gamble responsibly. It's an important game for us because a win here will probably see us leapfrog West Ham. I would have thought West Ham. Let me just have a double check who they're playing this weekend. But in terms of our goal difference, we have a massive.
I think West Ham are playing Wolves.
They do play Wolves on Sunday night. Good knowledge. Well done. Realistically, I'd see that game sort of probably being a draw at this stage. Wolves could win that, but I think West Ham are probably as good.
I would say
slightly better.
I reckon Wolves could beat West Ham.
I reckon, yeah,
Wolves they're just not consistent enough for me at the moment. They've got some great players, some real talent, but I don't know what it is. They can't string together results, which is why they're sitting in 13th and not 7th. But either way, it's another game where we can potentially pull further away, and it's an important one too. Look, we've got Brentford below us. They play Aston Villa, so you'd expect them to probably lose that game. Chelsea are in shocking form at the moment, but they do play Sheffield United, so you expect them to pick up points. Bournemouth are in a really good run of form at the moment. They play Luton, so you expect them to probably win that game. And like you said, Wolves, you could see beating West Ham. So, I mean, I'm not saying we're going to get dragged into a relegation dogfight here, but
not the worst round for us.
There's a possibility that we do drop all the way down to 14th after this game. Not the end of the world, but it is nice to be in the top half and to keep winning games. And look, a little run of form here and some bad results for Newcastle, Brighton, Man United. We all of a sudden start to actually look at those European spots. We move to 24 points. Newcastle stay on 26. Brighton are playing Arsenal this weekend. They stay on 26. Man United have to play Liverpool on Monday. They stay on 27. We're one win away from 6th place, effectively. Like it's so tight in that little midsection at the moment. These points are actually kind of vital for us. So look, it's a big game. I think. Let's have a quick chat about the lineup we'd like to see. Firstly, I guess just in general, are we hoping to see any changes, or do we expect Silva to go with an unchanged lineup for the third game running?
I mean, can you really change not just a winning side, but a side who's putting 5 goals past reasonable opposition?
Well,
The
Silver
only
does.
point of yeah, I know, but the only big question for me, I think, we were tossing about trying to understand what the best starting 11 for our wingers might be. But at what point does Kenny Tete um, overhaul Castagna as a starter?
That's actually a really interesting question because it is starting to get to the point where Silva is favoring Castagna for some games and Tete for others. Even though, like, I think we all agree that we kind of prefer Tete as the out and out starter. I do think Silva has a little bit of a different idea, and he's kind of playing, like, structuring the squad with a little bit more fluidity. In terms of wings, I mean, you're kind of spoiled for choice at the moment, aren't you? You either start Harry Wilson or Willian. I think that's
Uh,
probably the most contentious.
well, I think Iwobi is surely an absolute, weld
Oh, yeah.
on shoe in
He's
at the moment.
yeah, but he can kind of
He-
go anywhere, so it doesn't.
no, no,
Yeah,
no. But he's proven to be the difference. I think in the last month been put out on the right. So
Mm.
I cannot see that changing. And then you've got options as to who starts, whether Williams starts. I know Jack for a long time has had a view that Williams probably better when the game is stretched and he's not, challenged for legs and aerobic fitness or whatever it is, just leg speed. But um, Harry Wilson in good form. Geez, he looks good coming off the bench at the moment. He's straight into it, isn't he?
I am in a massive favor for players coming off the bench and having a utility role. I don't know why that's seen as like blasphemous. The game has completely changed in like the past like 7 years, I reckon, where having a revolving squad in a full 90 minutes is actually a very, very healthy contingent. So I don't think it's a diss to not necessarily start a player like Harry Wilson as long as he gets time and is played effectively. But I understand if people potentially agree with that as well.
Surely one of the biggest shifts in everyone's head at the moment is the fact that how can you leave TC out of the starting lineup? He
I
is
don't think you
he is
can.
he's made all the difference as well.
Yeah.
We Reed Polina was such a lock last year, and everyone loved that. But TC has been instrumental.
Yeah, I think as well. Like we're valuing creativity more so
Mm.
than disruption. So yeah, I think Tom Kearney and Polina stay. I
Jack,
know.
Well, I mean, Polina obviously stay. I'll track all the way back to the original comment, which was about Castagna over Tete. I don't think Silva favours Castagna.
No,
We've
I
got to
don't think so.
remember Kenny Tete is, well, that's what you said. You've got to remember Kenny Tete is coming back from injury. And I think when you don't have to force Tete back onto the field as quickly as we might have done in previous seasons, you have the ability to actually keep him on the bench for longer and just slowly reintroduce him into the side. I think
but he
once
hasn't done
he's
that.
fully fit, but he's obviously not fully fit yet.
I
Once
don't think
he
he's
is fully
obviously
fit,
not.
So that
No, I
so
don't think
that
that's true.
means. But hang on. So that means we're thinking his 80 minutes against Liverpool was not entirely successful from a rehab perspective. So that was a bit of a setback because if that was true that he was actually being managed back in, you would give him one a half, or maybe bring him on in the 50th minute
well,
because
I
he's
mean,
not. It's not.
it's not a friendly. I think he started that Liverpool game because he is the best right back at the club. We were playing the team that is currently the top of the Premier League, and so Silva takes a risk in playing your best player against the best team, and he shut down Nunez and who else was there? Luis Diaz on the day as well, and completely kept them out of the game. And when he went off, we conceded 2 goals. Um, I think that was probably a push too far for him to play the 80 minutes, but we kept him on for as long as possible. In the following games, we've played Castagna because potentially we've slightly aggravated the injury and Tete is not 100%. There's no
It
chance
must
that
be.
Tete
It
is
has to
being
be.
left on the bench. He's not getting left on the bench with Castagna ahead of him. Castagna's been performing well, but he's not been outstanding and he's not been performing well enough to keep Tete out of that side.
I don't know if I agree. I think Silva's
gotta be. Has to
selecting
be.
purely on a game by game basis. I
No.
think he's purely selecting
No.
based on what he needs for said game.
Look at how good Tete was. I mean, that wasn't a soft introduction. He just threw him in, started against Liverpool, and he was great. But he obviously just ran out of steam. Not surprisingly, no match fitness. How many weeks has he been out?
I mean, he runs out of
such a long
steam when he's fully fit as well. You see, he often gets dragged in the last minutes of games because he looks absolutely knackered.
Yeah, he does.
And so to come back from a long layoff and be put into a very intense game against Liverpool, I wouldn't surprise me if he was almost ready and we threw him in the deep end, and now we've actually just pushed his rehab back very slightly, so he's not fully ready yet. I wouldn't be
He's gotta be.
surprised if we saw him on the weekend, because
Yeah,
this is the first time we didn't have a midweek game for the last couple of weeks to actually give him the ability to have a full week's preparation for this one. In terms of the other players, I know I've been shouting for Harry Wilson to get a start. I actually think, well, consider this as posing a question to you both, or it's a bit of a rhetorical one, but Newcastle, we know, have lost their legs in the later half of games. Who would you rather actually have come on the wings late in the game? Admittedly, we'd love to have Adama Traore, but he's not quite ready yet. But if it's between Wilson or Willian, who's actually going to cause more issues for tired legs, in your opinion?
Oh, well, it's probably got to be Wilson, just purely based on his explosiveness and his acceleration. That's probably the only thing, because you could definitely also make the case for Willian, but I prefer it when Willian starts and then Wilson comes on later as a bit of an impact.
But Harry Wilson, Iwobi they're not going to play Iwobi on the left, right? So Iwobi plays on the right. Willian starts on the left. Harry Wilson never plays on the left for us. Does for Wales, not for us.
No. But what I see,
but then you move
is,
Iwobi over. That's what we've been doing.
Yeah, Iwobi moves over, or Deckard over Reed comes on late, or something like that. It's more about because he could start Wilson on the left, or could start Iwobi on the left, which he's done before. It's more. I agree with Sam, and that's the point I was sort of making. Is I think having Harry Wilson come off the bench in about the 60th minute to just tear a tired Newcastle defence apart makes much more sense than Willian. Willian's quick feet in close, but I'd keep thinking back to that moment when Wilson just dropped his shoulder and got in behind the defence with that little touch around the defender. It looked like Messi was playing. It was ridiculous. It's not something you expect to see from Fulham very often. And I think if you have someone like that who's jinking in and around defenders and chasing the ball down hard and pressing hard like Wilson does late in a game, I see a lot more benefit in him coming off the bench in this one.
I also think as well, where Willian and Wilson actually massively differ is Willian's composure, I think, is second to none. And even if he isn't as pacey, and if he doesn't, even if he's not the player that he was 10 years ago, I don't actually think it necessarily matters too much, because he will never be rattled by anything. He will always just play like Willian does. I do think Harry Wilson can get quite rattled if in the first 15 minutes of the game he feels like he's not playing the game that he wants to play. And I think he does actually benefit from playing around a squad which is significantly more tired, because I think he's a player that needs more time than the average one.
Are we happy with Pereira at the moment?
Oh, that's a good question.
It was easily his best game of the season so far against West Ham. And I also think Tom Cairney has to start as well. I just think the only change I would make is Tete over Castagna if he's fit. In terms of the midfield, I just wouldn't make any changes to it. I think it's just going so perfectly.
We haven't even talked about defenders yet, so we're just gung ho. It's Tosin and Bassi now. Have we
It
fully
is.
made up our mind?
It 100% is.
Well, I know you and I think that way because we talked about it on Tuesday. Jack, what do you reckon?
You're on mute, Jack.
Sorry, I think only an idiot thinks otherwise.
I don't
it's-
think that's fair. I don't think that's fair. You can kind of make a case.
Well, I think it's
I
tough.
don't think you
Love you,
case,
Tim.
but
Love you, Tim, but you're not squeezing back here easily.
you used to be able to make a case that Tim Ream adds a lot with his leadership, but from what I've seen in the last couple of games from those two together, I just can't see a way back in for Tim Ream. And nothing against Tim Ream. It's more the fact that the other two players in Bassi and Tosin are performing out of their skin at the moment. You know, Tosin's scoring goals. I don't know if you saw the highlights, and it's great that we actually are highlighting two defenders in little highlights packages, but those two cut out every single pass. They stopped attacks. They just dominated the game, and we haven't really seen that with Tim Ream this season. Last season we did, where Tim Ream was absolutely everywhere. We haven't seen that this year. But when Tosin and Bassi were playing together, we saw it, and it was kind of exciting because you've got these two rocks at the back, and then you've got Castagna and Robinson who are creating stuff going forward and also tracking back perfectly. You've got Polina sitting in front of them as this defensive enforcer. I think he made 8 tackles in the game against West Ham, which was a record for the Premier League this season. Kearney playing like he's 24 again and not in his 30s. It just, everything is clicking at the moment. And at the start of the season, for the first 12, 13 games, we were constantly saying it's just not clicking.
Do you reckon when Diop's fit again and Ream gets his best buddy back, do you reckon that could potentially displace the young boys and the old guard might have a chance to come back in, or do you reckon they're just done?
No, this is
I
on
don't think so.
form. On form, this is our, this is the A team, I think.
Oh, so definitive.
It's very Sunday league and community sport to have your position, and it's your position, and when you come back from injury, you just get it back. I think only the very top players in the world have the ability to reserve their spot.
I mean, that was me in indoor.
Well, yeah, that's what happens when you've only got 5 people and you've got no subs.
When you start a legacy.
When you have to play with what you need to
do. No, what you need to do is sponsor the shirt, Sam. That's the only way. It's literally owning the PA.
Yeah, owning the ball and owning the shirts, then you get a game every single week. But look, I think it's interesting. Steve Reynolds on the live stream also mentions Tosin is yet to sign a new contract. And I think that is the only thing that might play into it. If we can't come to an agreement with Tosin over what's happening next season, then there's the potential for a change there. I don't think the change will be Tim Ream coming back in. I think it'll be Diop playing on the right, because I think it's blaringly obvious that Bassi can't play as well on the right as he can on the left, and playing two left-sided defenders together, again, it's one of the reasons it wasn't quite clicking. And so I expect we'll see a change at some point, but only if Tosin doesn't sign a new contract. If he does sign a new contract, I see Tosin and Bassi for the foreseeable future. And look, harsh to say, but with someone like Defugeros coming through, we could potentially not see much more of Tim Ream going forward, because these two are very talented players, and Diop is probably at this stage your next best central defender. So it's an interesting little.
He can't play on the left though.
Yeah, of course. But it's an interesting little position we find ourselves in with the defenders. One thing I do want to talk about is a couple of bits of news actually that have popped up this week. The first of them is the fact that Tom Kearney brought up his 300th game in the game against West Ham. I'm not sure if you guys mentioned that on the podcast earlier in the week.
No, we didn't.
We did not.
But just, I don't know if you guys saw the video that Fulham put out as well for Tom Cairney. It was a bit of a tear jerker, looking back over Cairney's 8.5 years at the club. And I mean, we see at halftime in these games, Forever Fulham presentations, Tom Cairney's surely one of those guys who, as soon as he leaves the club, at some point in the hopefully distant future, he's instantly on the Forever Fulham list and gets recognised as a club icon, because there's not many people in football across the whole of England, especially in the top leagues, who stay with one club for 300 plus games, and Tom Cairney's one of them.
I heard the Hammersmith end is going to be renamed.
I don't think that's true, but
I just thought I'd float that out there.
Clip that,
sure,
someone.
Give it to him. Give it to him. We love Tom.
Clip that. Yeah, look, he's a legend of the club. He's been Fulham's captain for a long time. He scored the goal that got us promoted back to the Premier League after our absence. Guys, this Tom Cairney recently as well has just come to the fore as this superb playmaker. And look, I genuinely think he's one of the best midfielders in the Premier League on his day. I think his creativity from deep is just unreal. Sammy, your thoughts on Tom Cairney?
Oh, look, I mean, so creative, genuinely. I mean, the word underrated gets thrown around a lot. Obviously, he's not underrated by us because he's just given us so much over the years, but definitely underrated by the wider media. And I've been listening to a couple of like Gary Lineker's podcast, and even then they've been singing his praises recently, and it's actually just really nice to see that he's not going out with like a whimper, or not even necessarily going out, but he is still getting credibility and recognition so late in his time with the club. It's just nice. It actually comes at a really, really lovely point as well in just history. I don't know if you can even call it that, but like it's at a really lovely point that he is getting this recognition when we're also on a high, and he gets the full spotlight, because I think he genuinely deserves it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Sammy. It's obviously just great the fact that these players can sometimes pass a milestone and it just sort of slips by. But the fact is, not just Fulham have turned a corner recently, but Tom Cairney's turned a corner as well. Look at it last season; he came on as a substitute, I think 30 times. Which is just crazy. And the fact is, this season he does come on as a sub fairly often, but he's actually getting more starts, and we're starting to see a system in which he fits into quite nicely. Because previously, you've said it before, Sammy, he can't see out 90 minutes. He potentially is a bit too lightweight. These things have been thrown around, and he's actually just proving people wrong at this point. So look, it's great. Dad, thoughts on Tom Cairney?
Lots of thoughts on Tom Cairney. I marvel at his riz, as they say in the burbs. He's actually he's got a remarkable kind of ability to get the fans on side, hasn't he? I mean, he's a good player. He's a very, very good player, but he's just so immensely popular.
He's charming.
Yeah.
And he's a great bloke.
Yeah. And Tim Ream's got a sort of a different flavour. Tim's just an incredibly decent bloke, and he's a great guy. He's a wonderful representative of the club out in the community and all that sort of good stuff. But Tom Cairney, a fractionally cheeky chappy. I think he's quite a laugh around the training ground and in the rooms, and I think the fans see that, and that's the sort of guy you want to be in the engine room, keeping spirits up, isn't it? It's just a good sort.
I think Tom Cairney for me is like the head boy that you don't hate, because there isn't really anything about him that you think, where are you? You're annoying, and you're getting all this kind of, you've got like a shit-eating grin and all that. Nah, he's the guy that's like, you're the man, and everyone goes, yeah, you are, and you know what? I'm behind you.
Yeah,
Sure.
good point.
Interesting point from Steve Reynolds as well. We talk about Kenny being underrated. I think that's a good way to phrase it. The fact is, he's only somehow picked up 2 caps for a pretty poor Scotland team over the last 10 years or so. It is, for me, very disappointing that he can't break into that squad, considering, it's not the strongest international squad out there, and he's consistently performed at a high level for a very long time. So look, I do actually hope that Kenny gets a few more international appearances, because genuinely think he deserves it. Now, one thing that I haven't got a slide for on our live stream, but a bit of recent news, which I hope you both saw, Bernd Leno signing a contract extension.
Yeah.
I did see that. That's
so that now
so
takes him
stoked.
through to, I think it's 2027, which will see him be 36 years old from memory. It's a decent little pay rise for him as well, but it takes him through to 2027 plus an option to extend for a further year as well.
Did they quote his salary increase?
I've seen Fulham fan news on Twitter saying that he's picked up a £3 million per year increase. So just working that out off the top of my head.
So what was it? Was
calculator? Is an extra
60 grand a week, isn't it? No.
Yeah, 60 grand a week extra.
Yeah. So what? I thought he was on. I thought he was on pushing 100 grand.
I don't think he was. Jimenez is on 100 from what I understand. I reckon he's probably been bumped up to 100. I reckon he was probably on about 40 before, and he's probably pushed up, or maybe 50, and he's probably pushed up to 100.
Surely he wouldn't have come from Arsenal for 40 or 50.
Keepers don't get paid big bucks. That's the one thing, especially if you're not the German international starting keeper, and you were kind of a bit of a squad keeper for Arsenal as well. He would. I'm pretty sure he took a pay cut to join Fulham. And we don't have a huge number of players on those big numbers.
Did you? Speaking of, I saw a little article summarising the top English players, top earners, English players. Did you see that?
No,
recently?
Fill me in. What's the sitch?
Well, who do you think the top earner is right now?
Well, probably
English
be Haaland.
Yep. No, English player.
As in, like, playing in the Premier League, or as in from
Worldwide?
Rashford.
Haaland's got to be there.
No, English player.
Man City.
English. No,
Sam. English. They are from England, Sam.
I asked that question before, and Dad was like, "Yeah, no, playing in England."
No. I said English player playing worldwide. Henderson.
Henderson. That's not
Grealish?
surprising.
600,000 pounds a week, which
but that's Saudi. That's Saudi. You
can double. That's tax free.
Yeah, but still doesn't count.
Yeah,
Bellingham.
Sorry, I'd be counting every one of those.
I am
filthy pounds.
Saudi money.
Blood
Saudi money. That's like Sims money.
All
That
right,
is like putting a hack on the Sims and just getting like,
Get over yourselves. Bellingham was definitely up there. Actually, I think second place went to Harry Kane, who was about 400 and something £1,000.
Rashford, Foden.
Grealish?
Grealish is around 300,000 from memory, and I think Rashford's around 300,000 as well.
Oh mate, Rashford's a mugging Man U at the moment, but that's a whole other conversation.
Anyway, that's massively off topic. Bernd Leno, new contract, huge one, and it came out of the blue as well. But it's good to see that Fulham are considering these things and starting to tie down players, and maybe it's because there was a little bit of interest with the January window coming up. Maybe Fulham went, we need to tie down these players at the moment. And look, Bernd Leno, I think last season, you could say more so than this season, he was integral to the fact that we had such a good finish to the year.
Oh yeah.
If you looked at the XG, that conversation isn't happening this year. Last year, it was constantly Fulham massively outperforming the stats, and it was purely down to Bernd Leno. Realistically, he made some ridiculous saves that he shouldn't have done that kept us in games and won us points. This year, I think we're actually just playing better than we have done previously. And Leno isn't required quite as much. When he is required, he's been great. He's off the back of 2 clean sheets. It smacks of a really good piece of business, tying down a really key cog that keeps this team functioning perfectly and running really well. Anything to add to that, guys? It feels like a good piece of business to me.
I mean, Leno, Polina, who else? Who else is there? Probably Tim Ream and probably Tom Kearney as well. Just throw all the money at the world at them. I just want to keep them for as long as I possibly can, and I don't care. I don't care what the tax offset is. Just keep throwing money at those boys. Love them to pieces.
I think William's earning a packet as well.
Yeah, and you know what? He deserves it. Also love him as well.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a really good signing. I think not a signing as such, but with January around the corner, it's going to be interesting to see what moves we make at this point. Does Polina leave? Does Polina stay? Do we still need to sign a striker? I think these are things we can discuss as we get closer to January, and I hope we will in a bit more depth. But considering the form we're in at the moment,
January.
Considering the form we're in at the moment, a lot of the questions feel like they're being answered. I mean, you could argue that the team we've got at the moment is good enough to finish very comfortably in the top half. It's now about how the club
please don't
goes.
say that. Don't say that within earshot of Tony, please.
No, but it is all about how the club responds to this. Do they say we're fine where we are, or do they say we really do need to sign players in January? January is a tough period to sign players in. Prices are massively inflated because they know that you need them more so in January than at the end of the season. The contracts aren't up, contracts aren't expiring. It's a weird little time, and you have to be a little bit careful when signing players in January. So there's a lot to discuss there, and it'll be very interesting when we get to it as well. Guys, before we finish up, I do want to talk quickly about the Fulham women's team as well. They finished off this side of the season with a 3-2 win against Ebbsfleet United. Ebbsfleet sitting, they've had a weird little structure this season where Ebbsfleet, I think, are like 4 or 5 games behind Fulham at the moment in terms of the league table, but are actually doing very well this season. They've only played 8 games. Fulham have played 13, but Ebbsfleet only sit 14 points behind us, which might seem like much, but when you have 5 games in hand, it's actually 5 wins. So it was a very important game for us to get a result in, and we did so very well. 2 goals from Sasha Adamson, 1 from Georgia Heisman, a late goal from Ebbsfleet made it look a little closer than it possibly was. A 3-2 victory actually lifts Fulham to the top of the league going into the Christmas break. Yeah, it's a good result, and obviously Dartford sitting below us have 3 games in hand on us. But as we've said throughout the season, it's all about getting into that first place and letting everyone else chase you and putting pressure on people. Dartford know now that they have to win those games to get back to the top of the league, but we're actually in that first place at the moment. I guess just a very brief recap of the first half of the season. Sophie Manzi with 15 goals and 7 assists. Georgia Heisman with 11 goals and 6 assists. Sasha Adamson, 9 goals, 10 assists. Edie Bushell, mostly off the bench with 8 goals and 4 assists. Megali Mendez, 7 goals, 5 assists. Guys, we've been fortunate enough to be able to watch the full game against Arsenal earlier this year, about a month or so ago. And we see the talent that's in this squad, and the fact that this team actually has the ability to potentially take it to the next stage and win promotion. Based on that game and also the games that we've covered and the reports that we've read for the first half of the season, and Sammy, I'll throw to you first on the spot. Who's your player of the first half of the season so far? Who's most impressed you?
Oh, oh. Do you know what? I reckon I'm gonna go Tagliafieri. Tagliafieri. I loved her in the Arsenal game. I thought she was incredible, and I think she we don't talk enough about her because again it's not as reflective in the overall statistics that we actually get, but the way that she commanded the game, I thought she was absolutely fantastic, and I could definitely see myself if I was able to watch her week in, win out, really, really, really loving her in the exact same way that I love Polina, and in the exact same way that I love Reem as well. I really like defenders. I really, really, really like defenders. A good defender that's the way to my heart.
Very good answer, Sammy. I'd definitely put Ella up there as one of the most impressive players from that full 90 minutes we managed to watch against Arsenal. And from everything I've read as well and followed throughout this season as well, she's having a great season.
No,
Often takes a captain's armband as well. A really impressive player. Dad, same question to you.
Yeah, well, I think we all agreed that our defence against Arsenal was really impressive, really well organised, hard-working, and yeah, they did very, very well. I really like what I see in Sasha Adamson. She's a goal scorer. She's incredibly hardworking. She is well, and evidenced by the number of assists, not only goals that she's actually getting. And she just seems like a handful. Just very difficult to keep down, both on the field and in the bus. And I like her energy. Georgia Heisman is obviously, very, very capable and incredibly hardworking as well. I'm going for the hardworking theme here.
I was just going to say, I like hearing our justifications. It really says a lot about us individually.
Yeah, for the hardworking. And yeah, not to ignore our top goal scorer here, but I'm just sort of trying to look behind that. Obviously, she's having a very, very good season, and it's nothing better than having a key goal scorer that you can rely on week in, week out. And obviously, we've got some real talent in goalkeepers as well, because I thought both the women in that Arsenal game were incredible. They did very different jobs in goal. And obviously, Ellie Parker got the plaudits, and she was doing the putting, and I can't remember the name of the other woman who was in goal. Help me out.
Ellie Parker, Libby Stratton.
It was Libby Stratton. I thought she was terrific. Actually, I thought she was really,
she had
really good.
a really good game. And look, I think across the board we've got good keepers. And it makes a big difference when you know that you can rotate your keepers in and out effectively, and not feel like you're at a disadvantage. I think it's a huge help for us, because you want that squad depth, especially at this level where you do need to rotate fairly often. And it helps to rotate fairly often. Looking at it, Ellie Parker's played 7 of the 15 games so far. So the fact is we are rotating our keeper on a fairly regular basis, and to know that it doesn't really matter who's in goal, you're going to still be comfortable with that person. It does make a massive difference. I totally agree with that.
Trust and utter belief in whoever comes off the bench, whoever starts, doesn't matter. You know they could do a job. And I remember from our first chat, I truly think there is that belief in the squad that they can all do a job. One final thing I said, I know this doesn't address the question of who do I think the best player was, and I named about 19 of them.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're really going off here on this one. Yeah, this
just
keeps on going. Never-ending story.
Yeah, it's okay. I actually think, Man City absolutely elite, but look at them. Even things aren't going their way at the moment. And Dartford's not Man City. they are surely more vulnerable, way more vulnerable. So now that we've got our head in front and we actually occupy pole position and somewhat getting in their heads, I think it's all to play for. And this is kind of end of the first half, isn't it, of the season? And it's a great position to be in, and I think we're in with a massive chance here.
Yeah,
in
and
terms of
Dartford don't
promotion.
have semi-regular content on our weekly podcast as well. So take that, Dartford. Jack, who's your favorite player? Dad, you spoke for way too long.
But
Okay,
it's not.
sorry,
It's
guys.
not. No, it was all good. Good chat. It's more about who has most impressed me so far this season. And unfortunately, Dad named every player in the squad.
He did.
But I do agree. Sasha Adamson has been a really good signing for us. It's not just the 9 goals; it's the 10 assists on top of that. Has just been outstanding across the board in terms of chance creation, and we've created a lot of chances. Sophie Manzi has to be talked about for being the leading goal scorer for the whole of the league, and also having 7 assists on top of that, averaging an assist every other
Sure.
game. Edie Bichelle's really impressed me for a young kid coming into the side,
Yeah.
often having to come off the bench and making an impact. She's only started 2 games this season. She scored 8 goals and got 4 assists.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Often not getting more than sort of 30 minutes in a game and still always having an impact. It shows she's got a great future. Person I will say, though, has impressed me a lot is Megali Mendez. I think playing in that left wing back role and being really impressive going forward, as well as impressive defensively, scoring goals, taking set pieces, getting assists. Has been, I think we've all sort of mentioned players who are a little bit more defensive and have impressed in that sense. And I think having someone who can play at the back but also create chances going forward in a similar sort of style to Robinson. We love Robinson defensively a lot of the time, but when he's actually creating things going forward, it adds even more to everything that we do. So hard to pick a player of the first half of the season, but there's definitely, you could easily hand it out to any 4 or 5 players. Georgia Heisman as well, I didn't mention, but 11 goals, 6 assists from her 15 games. And a lot of these players as well playing their first season at the club and impressing straight away. It's really good to see. And look, I'm looking forward to the second half of the season. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that there might be another game at the Cottage sometime down the track. But hopefully we just continue to get these results rolling in slowly but surely and constantly pushing forward for that promotion spot. One thing, I guess, to add, there's a few players in that Fulham women's team who've had a few injuries. Edie Bichelle had a concussion, which left her out of the last couple of games. Tia Foreman, who we were fortunate enough to have on the podcast at the start of the season, has a foot injury that's kept her out for pretty much the whole of the first half of the season. Anissa Hall has recently had ACL surgery. That was last week, which apparently went very well, but obviously has a bit of a road to recovery ahead of her. So a big shout out to those players, and hopefully they do come back from those injuries stronger and as soon as possible. So please do, for all Fulham fans listening, please do try and get around this women's team as much as possible. They're a really amazing bunch of players, bunch of people as well who have a lot of time for Fulham fans. So I 100% think that everyone, especially if you've got kids, especially if you've got young girls as well who, maybe if just starting to get into football, go down to Motspur Park, be able to talk to the players as they come off the pitch and actually get photos with these players who can potentially be icons for them in the future. It's really important for the growth of the club.
Learn their chance.
100% learn their chance. Sam?
I was just going to say as well, it's been a real genuine pleasure actually covering them and watching them develop and grow, even if the content that we've actually got from them has been sporadic. I like to think that we've actually helped them at least get like a bit more seen and get more like spotlight on them. And just even if we passively contributed, I feel like it's actually been a really, really rewarding thing. And the fact that they're actually at the top of the table now is just really like the icing on the cake. And I feel that like I feel that we give ourselves a pat on the back here. We have really gotten behind them, and I think that we've done very, very well.
Not about us, Sammy, but yes, I agree. I agree with the sentiment, though. Like, at the start of the season, let's all be perfectly frank and honest with ourselves. I couldn't name a Fulham women's player apart from Mary
Nope.
Southgate, and it's not for any particular reason apart from it was being international fans, especially. It's not something that's ever covered in general. It's not something we get much. Well, we didn't really see many highlights packages last year. It felt we just it was hard to follow, and we didn't know much about it. And I feel as just I guess a sense of joy knowing the fact that I can pretty much rattle off the entire squad. And I know what positions they play. I know their strengths. I've been fortunate enough to watch them play a full 90 minutes. I know all of their results. I know the opposition teams they play against. I know that their games are always, or pretty much always, 2 or 2:30 in Wattsburg Park when they're playing at home. Like it adds another dimension to being a Fulham fan, and I've really really enjoyed this first half of the season. And like you said, I really hope that next half of the season is just as exciting and impressive. And I really hope we push on and finally get that promotion that we've been so close to for the last few seasons. And look, even if we don't, we'll go again. And hopefully the changes to women's football that are coming over the next few years see that open up a little bit more and see us maybe have 2 promotion spots out of this league eventually. Make it a little bit easier for other teams to be able to go up rather than just the teams that come back down. Dad, anything to add? Me and Sam have had a nice little monologue there.
No. I've had my monologue.
You've had like
No.
6.
Hmm?
You've had like 6 monologues.
Yep. No, nothing to add. Just get some rest, girls. You got a big second half.
Yeah, here.
Absolutely. So, guys, look, I think we can probably wrap it up there. It's a massive game this weekend off the back of the purplest of patches from Fulham. 2 5-0 wins. Can we make it 3 in a row? Put $5 on at 200 to 1. It's a done deal for sure. Has to happen, surely. But seriously, I'm really looking forward to this game on the weekend. I just feel like this Fulham team is in a really good place at the moment, and it could be a really exciting game where we test ourselves against one of the better teams in the league. So thank you very much, Dad, for joining us tonight.
You're very welcome. Saturday night, 11 o'clock. It's my wedding anniversary. I'm out to dinner. And how do I balance this? How do I actually, stay on at dinner for...
Mum will understand.
I would probably say objectively you'd need to put our mother first. I would forgive you for putting our mother first. You can quote me on that.
She'll understand.
Two very conflicting viewpoints, and
that's what makes it a good show.
I'm just interested in seeing the fallout more than anything of the week of cold shoulder you get for your wedding anniversary, saying, just off, you go to bed because I'm just going to watch Fulham now.
Well, it's as I said, 11 o'clock kickoff, 8 p.m. start kickoff for dinner. I'll probably just have a starter and press for leaving early.
Oh, I wish we discussed this earlier because this is good content. Like, just like how do you strategically get through an anniversary dinner to get home to an 11 p.m. kickoff?
Yeah, the Uber will be booked for about 8:45.
Yeah,
and I'll have to tip the waiter to tell us that the table's needed or something like that. But I can realistically see myself actually starting watching this game about 2 o'clock in the morning, because I'm not.
I'm just picturing you valet parking and then just speeding home like that.
Anyway,
well, I'll tell you one thing. I'm not. Last week, I don't know if you guys discussed it on the podcast, but last week, Dad was unable to watch the first half of the game, so I watched the first half. then paused it and rewound it and watched the first half again with Dad when he came around to watch it with me. So
Oh yeah, no,
um,
yeah. I think we did.
Yeah, but I actually knew. I didn't know the score. We never spoil. I didn't know the score, but what I did know is that the only way
yeah, when I
in
said I'm
this
happy to watch that
universe,
half again,
yeah, I knew we'd scored a hatful. I knew it. I
not
knew
a
it.
hatful, but you knew it wasn't bad news, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Okay,
but
before I
yeah, no,
leave,
look, I'm not
before,
pausing this time
before
around.
I leave,
Yeah.
you got within 10 seconds. Can you get it right? How many years have I been married?
Oh shit. Okay. Wait. No. Okay. Let me work this out. Let me work
8,
this out.
7,
39.
6,
You got married. You got married when you were
5,
26, right? Like extortionately young.
3.
1984, 39.
Jack called it. Jack called it.
39. Damn, that's
Yeah,
pretty good. That's pretty
39
good.
years. Yeah.
I mean, like,
Glass, that's a good son. Knew it off the bat. 1984,
Yeah.
16th
I
of
mean,
December. Well done.
I'm
Yeah.
not. I can do your birthdays off the back of my head.
You've just secured the Bradman bat, Jack.
I
It's
don't
all right.
think anyone else in the
I
family
wanted
wants
the
it. Let's be
strat
honest.
anyway.
Hey, that's when you should have said, "I've just secured this strat." That would have caused a lot more issue. Anyway, guys,
All right.
let's wrap it up there. Thanks again, Dad. Sammy, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and hopefully Dad doesn't give my mother whiplash on the weekend. So yeah, that's all from me. God bless you all. Thank you and good night.
Lovely. So everyone, thank you again for tuning in, and until next time, come on, you whites.